Bernard Hickey for the Kaka. This is where I pick out 6 things at 6 a.m. that tell us something about Aotearoa's political economy around housing, climate and poverty. Right, let's have a look at these 6 things here as I share the window. Right, hopefully you can see that there today. We've learned that Christopher Luxon is refusing to resign after polls showing the worst numbers for National and for Christopher Luxon since 2020. There was speculation yesterday which got quite heated, and towards the end of the day, Christopher Luxon had to come out in an interview on News Talk ZB to say he had no intention of going because the speculation focused on whether or not he would step aside, given no one wanted to challenge him. And let's have a look then at the numbers that show the problems for Christopher Luxon. You can see there, this is the Curia Taxpayers Union poll, which came out yesterday. You might recall I previewed it in yesterday's Dawn Chorus. You can see there, as preferred Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins has jumped above Christopher Luxon for the first time substantially. And Christopher Luxon's preferred PM status continues to bump along the bottom. Perhaps more importantly, the decided party vote over time from Curia, which of course is the in-house pollster for National, show Labor opening up a significant lead now, close to 7 points or so. And that will be a concern for National because that would mean many of the current members on the list, the likes of Chris Bishop and Nicola Willis, would be unlikely to get seats in an election if the result was anything like 28%. And of course, that would mean if they were to get into government, they would have a weak position in negotiations with New Zealand First and ACT. So worth keeping an eye on there. The other big news this week, a 20% rise in the price of oil, and overnight the price rise rose over $90 a barrel for Brent oil, which is the one that we keep an eye on. This, of course, is putting a surge of inflation through the global economy. And there's a risk here that we hit over $100 a barrel as the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, if not from Iranian military action, then from insurers. And there is widespread skepticism that Donald Trump's promise to back the insurers so that the ships for oil and gas and other commodities, including fertilizer, get through the Strait of Hormuz. There's skepticism that will actually work. And also that the US Navy will be able to escort ships through. So prices up 20%, and we're starting to see that impacted at the pumps. Now, overnight, Donald Trump's come out with a Truth Social message saying, using his all caps, there'll be no deal with Iran except for unconditional surrender, whatever that means. Pretty impossible to enforce unless you've got boots on the ground. And this is really an escalation because previously he'd hoped that they'd just give up and hand over their arms. This is obviously not going to happen. And the more time we spend on this, we're a week into the war now, the wider it gets, the more countries get pulled in, and the more dangerous it is, purely from an inflation point of view, apart from the obvious loss of lives and grief around the region. So that's worth knowing. And of course, that's flowing through into petrol prices in New Zealand. Yesterday, we saw in some parts of New Zealand petrol over $3 a litre. And that's, of course, for premium. And when we get unleaded over $3 a litre, that's a psychological milestone, I think, that politically is a problem for everyone. But arguably for the economy, the biggest problem is diesel. Remember, diesel is what really drives the economy, gets goods into shops, gets them between towns, runs all sorts of equipment and machinery. And if you've got no diesel, really you've got no economy running at any great extent. Remember, we've only got 22.6 days of diesel left. We have no refinery and we're reliant on imports from Singapore and South Korea. Interestingly, yesterday, China banned exports of refined products from its refineries. And China is the swing producer in the Asia-Pacific region for refined products. That means that prices of refined products in Asia-Pacific will rise even more so. And of course, those refineries in South Korea and Singapore we rely on primarily use crude that's come from the Middle East. So because of the blockage of the Strait of Hormuz, we are at the end of a very long supply chain. We have fewer stocks because we don't have the refinery at Marsden Point anymore, and that is a risk. And this is one to watch in the coming days as we start to talk about things like rationing, and we certainly see the prices rise for diesel. This is, again, sending another commodity price shock, and you'd have to expect a food price shock because of the fertilizer problems through our economy. Now, a scoop to look out for today from One News last night from Thomas Mead. Christchurch Hospital have sent letters to dialysis patients saying they don't have enough staff or rooms to handle the increase in demand, and that means they're going to have to cut back dialysis sessions from 3 a week to 2 a week, which of course increases the risk of things going wrong. Again, this is part of our problem with a sicker and sicker population, an aging population, and a population subject to obesity, which often can contribute to these dialysis issues. And of course, population growth in Christchurch has been very fast, and that's where the pointy end of the crisis in our health system is coming. Now, this is because, of course, both parties have not funded health properly. Remember, if you're promising to keep the size of government under 30% of GDP in the long run, you only have a few levers you can pull because there's a bunch of things you can't change. For example, you can't really change entry to primary schools. You can't change the basics for hospitals. And of course, you can't change them. The main thing is the New Zealand superannuation. Remember, New Zealand superannuation costs are rising at a rate of almost $2 billion a year. And you can't do anything about that unless, of course, you change the entitlements or the age or the indexation. So you have to look for other ways you can essentially pull the discretionary levers. And the most obvious way is in health, and that's to ration care. And you can do that without having to change policy or change the law. You just let it happen in the hospitals. And of course, the pressure grows on the staff in the hospitals. And last night, a scrambling effort by Simeon Brown, the minister, to say that they were going to employ people next week or open job ads next week. Of course, this is the government continually holding a sinking lid on spending in the health sector. The last set of accounts showed a significant underspend on expected healthcare costs because a lot of these jobs, which in theory are open, are not really open, and the health system is letting the growth in demand hit the wall, and you're seeing these sorts of piece by piece, under the radar letters to customers, blowout in waiting lists. That's how the sinking lid flows through into real services. And another thing I think is worth mentioning, this is from a land that produces, in theory, enough food to feed 40 million people. Foodstuffs has announced they're going to start importing US butter for Pack and Save because the price of butter in New Zealand's too high and they want to try and reduce the costs. This really is a thing. So worth keeping an eye on there. I'm Bernard Hickey. That was today's Dawn Chorus for Saturday, March the 7th. Ka kite anō.